in the quiet coastal town of Windermere, where the sea whispered secrets through the breeze and the sunsets painted the sky with lavender hues. Aidan Walker had finally learned to stop waiting. Once a hopeful soul, now he lived life with a resigned calm, running his family's old bookshop that stood tucked between a vintage bakery and an art gallery on Harbor Lane. The shop, with its creaky wooden floors and the scent of old pages, was both a sanctuary and a reminder. A reminder of her, Lena Hart, the girl who had left with his heart and never looked back. Every morning, he opened the shop at precisely 9, turned the sign on the glass door to welcome, and brewed a pot of dark roast coffee. Locals adored the place. It wasn't just the books, but the peaceful atmosphere, the way sunlight filtered through the tall windows and made the dust in the air shimmer like something magical. But even in the charm of Windermere, Aidan moved like someone quietly trying to forget. On a particularly breezy Thursday morning in early spring, Aidan was stacking a row of new arrivals when the little bell above the door chimed a sound he'd heard thousands of times, but never like this. He turned around slowly, expecting the usual familiar face. But instead he froze. There she stood, Lena, hair longer, eyes softer, as if time had tried to wear down the edges of her sharp beauty and failed. She wore a pale yellow sundress and carried a small leather backpack slung over one shoulder. Her presence filled the room in an instant, and Aidan, for a second, forgot how to breathe. "Hi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but it landed with the weight of all the years between them. Aidan blinked. "Lena?" She gave a small, hesitant nod. "Yeah, I wasn't sure if you'd still be here." His fingers gripped the spine of a book too tightly, and he placed it down slowly before stepping forward. "Windermere doesn't change much." She smiled, but there was sadness in it. Neither do some people. Silence stretched between them, filled with questions neither was sure how to ask. Outside, the breeze picked up, rattling the wind chimes someone had hung next door, and inside, Aidan's heart beat like he was 20 again and falling all over for the girl who once promised forever. "What are you doing here?" He finally asked. "I came back," she said, the words so simple and yet carrying 1,000 meanings. "For a little while, at least. My mom's not well. I'm staying at the old place. The old place? The same white cottage near the cliffs. The same place she used to drag him to on Sunday afternoons to sketch the sea while he read beside her." His voice caught in his throat. "I'm sorry about your mom." She nodded and glanced around the shop. "It looks the same. Still smells like history and hope." "It's yours if you want to browse," he offered stiffly. Unsure of what else to say, she walked forward slowly, running her fingers along the shelves like she needed to touch proof that this wasn't just a dream. Aidan watched her, each step a slow echo of memories he had long tried to bury. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she paused at the poetry section, they were all pieces of the girl he used to know. "I miss this place," she murmured. "I missed a lot of things." Aidan leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "Why did you come back now?" She met his gaze, eyes filled with something too complex to name. "Because I finally realized what I left behind." The bell above the door chimed again as a customer walked in, but Aidan's eyes didn't leave hers. For the first time in years, something stirred in his chest, a flicker, a whisper. A question. Hope. Windermere had always been a small town with a big heart, nestled between rolling green hills and a coastline kissed by mist and memory. It was the kind of place where strangers didn't stay strangers for long, and stories clung to the cobblestone streets like ivy on old brick walls. Aidan had never planned to stay forever, but after Lena left 5 years ago, the town became the only place that still felt like something he could hold on to. After their brief encounter at the bookstore, Lena became a quiet presence in town again. She'd appear at the market in the mornings, her tote bag filled with lemons and wildflowers, or be seen walking her mother's aging golden retriever along the cliffside trails they used to visit as teens. The town noticed. The older women at the bakery whispered, "She's back," as they packed loaves of sourdough and cinnamon rolls, while Mr. Jensen at the gallery offered her a warm nod, but nothing more. He remembered how devastated Aiden had been when she left, but no one had the full story. Lena had left Windermere to chase a life that felt like hers, a scholarship to Chicago, then an art collective in Portland. She'd always said she needed the world before she could settle into a single place. But the world had not given her what she thought it would. Somewhere between gallery shows and city lights, she'd lost more of herself than she'd gained. Her mother's diagnosis had been the jolt that made her stop running. Back in the town she once fled, Lena tried to fit into days that had moved on without her. She painted again in the mornings by the sea, letting colors bleed onto canvas with the same emotion she used to write him letters with. And she visited the bookstore frequently now, sometimes to buy books, sometimes just to sit. She never stayed long, but long enough that Aiden noticed the way her presence quietly rearranged the air in the room. Aiden tried to remain indifferent. He buried himself in work, in cataloging rare editions, helping school kids find fantasy novels, and chatting with old Mrs. Green, who came in every Thursday for her historical romances. But he couldn't ignore how Lena's reappearance had unmoored something steady inside him. The girl he had loved was now a woman familiar, yet changed, softer, wiser, haunted, maybe. One afternoon, as rain tapped gently on the shop's windows, she came in without a word and handed him a wrapped bundle, one of her paintings. He hesitated before opening it, but when he did, the breath left his lungs. It was the bookstore bathed in golden sunset light. The sign tilted slightly, ivy crawling up the sides, and in the window, a silhouette of a boy holding a book with the faint outline of a girl just outside, her hand on the glass. "I painted it the night I returned," she said quietly, her voice barely above the soft jazz playing on the old stereo. "It's how I remembered it." Before I walked in, he stared at the canvas for a long time, unsure whether the ache in his chest was nostalgia or something deeper. He wanted to ask her why she really came back. He wanted to ask if she remembered the last night they were together, the promises whispered under starlight, the letter she never responded to, the broken pieces she left behind, but he did in single quotes T dot instead. He hung the painting on the wall behind the register, where everyone could see it. And Lena, standing beside him, smiled like that meant something. Outside, the rain cleared, leaving the streets damp and gleaming, like the town itself had been washed of its burdens. But Aiden knew better. Some storms didn't leave puddles. They left people quiet, changed, and waiting. The days grew heavier with unspoken things. Each time Lena stepped into the bookstore, the air between her and Aiden crackled with things neither dared to say. She would linger a moment longer than necessary at the front desk, her fingers brushing the spines of poetry books they once read together. He would watch her when she wasn't looking, memorizing the way her smile now carried edges and shadows it never used to. They never spoke about the past. Not about their last kiss that they overlook. Not about the summer she left without saying goodbye in person. Not about the letters he wrote that went unanswered. Instead, their conversation stayed comfortably surface level, like a dance too careful to step on toes. But their eyes betrayed them, and silence began to say more than words. One evening, the power went out in Windermere. A sudden storm swept in, knocking out electricity and soaking the cobblestone streets. Aiden, still in the shop, lit a few candles to keep the space warm. He didn't expect Lena to appear soaked, breathless, hair clinging to her cheeks as the bell above the door chimed. "I was walking home," she said, breath catching, "and I saw your lights." He offered her a towel, and they sat on the rug near the fireplace he rarely used. For the first time in years, they were alone without the noise of the world or the town around them. Just rain, flickering candlelight, and the beating of hearts. That had never really let go. They talked, really talked, about what had been, about why she left, about why he didn't chase her, and about the in-between, the ache that stretched across the miles and years. Like a bridge they had both been too afraid to cross. I thought I had to leave to find who I was, Lena whispered, staring at the flames. But everywhere I went, I kept feeling like I'd already left something behind that was real. Aiden didn't respond right away. He watched her closely, as if searching for the girl he once loved in the woman now beside him. "You did," he said finally. "You left me." Silence settled between them again, heavier this time, but Lena didn't cry. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out an old, weather-worn envelope. "The one she had never sent," I wrote back, she said softly, placing it on his lap. "I just ... never mailed it." He stared at it, unmoving. Then finally, with trembling hands, he opened it. The paper was creased and faded, the ink slightly smudged, but the words were clear. And as he read them, the years between them collapsed into nothing. "I left, but I never stopped loving you. I thought letting go was brave. Now I know coming back is braver." When he looked up, her eyes were wet. Not from the rain, but from the truth finally spoken. They didn't kiss that night. They didn't need to. The space between them had already begun to dissolve. Something softer, more fragile had taken root trust. And a love that had waited silently, patiently, was beginning to stir awake. Outside, the storm passed. But inside the little bookstore, the most beautiful kind of storm had just begun. The days that followed felt different, gentler, charged with quiet electricity. Aiden and Lena didn't speak of the letter again, but something had undeniably shifted. The unspoken tension that once hung in the air had softened, making room for something sweeter, something real. Lena started coming to the bookstore more frequently, not just to browse, but to stay. She helped Aiden reorganize the poetry section, laughing at his stubborn alphabetizing rules. He brewed an extra cup of coffee in the mornings, setting it on the counter just the way she liked, 2 sugars, no cream. They didn't define what was happening between them. There were no labels, no heavy expectations, just moments. Soft, fleeting moments that stitched themselves into the fabric of their days. A shared umbrella in the rain, her hand brushing his as they reached for the same book. Long walks down Willow Lane, talking about everything and nothing. Aiden, who had spent years learning how to live with silence, now found himself craving the sound of her laughter. And Lena, who had traveled the world searching for belonging, felt more at home in a small-town bookstore than she ever had anywhere else. One Saturday afternoon, while the sun spilled golden light through the windows, Lena sat cross-legged on the floor, thumbing through an old journal from their teenage years, one Aiden had nearly forgotten existed. Inside were doodles, half-finished poems, and a folded photograph of them at the town's summer carnival. Her smile faded slightly as she traced the edges of the picture. "You used to write about me," she said, her voice soft with wonder. "I never stopped," he replied, almost in a whisper. She looked up, startled by his honesty, and for a moment, the silence between them was louder than ever. Lena leaned forward, her gaze searching his. "Why didn't you ever move on?" He considered the question, then answered truthfully, "Because no one else ever felt right. Even when I tried, it was always you." Her breath caught in her throat. She could see the truth in his eyes, not desperation, not longing, but something more enduring. Love that had matured through pain. Love that had waited without asking. That evening, they sat on the porch outside the bookstore, watching the stars blink into view. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he didn't move, just let her stay there, in the kind of silence that spoke volumes. For the first time, Lena wasn't running from anything, and Aiden wasn't waiting for something to change. They were simply there together, not in the future, not tangled in the past, but in a fragile, beautiful present that felt like the beginning of something lasting. The fragile world Lena and Aiden had built, quiet, gentle, and filled with growing hope, began to tremble beneath the weight of unspoken truths. It started with a phone call. Lena had stepped outside the bookstore one morning, her phone pressed tight to her ear. Aiden didn't hear what was said, only saw her expression change from light-hearted joy to a distant, haunted stare. She didn't say much afterward, just that it was work stuff and that everything was fine, but things weren't fine. Not really. Over the next few days, Lena grew quiet again, her smile shorter, her mind often miles away, even when she was sitting across from Aiden. He tried not to pry. He didn't want to chase her off. Not when it had taken so much to bring her back. But he felt her slipping like sand through open fingers. Then came the conversation that broke him. "I might be leaving," Lena said one evening, her voice barely above the whisper of the wind. Aiden stilled. "Leaving? There's an offer, a nonprofit in San Francisco. It's everything I've been working toward for the past 5 years. They want me to head a community outreach program. It's big." He nodded slowly, too stunned to speak. She waited for him to say something, anything. To fight. To ask her to stay, but he didn't. He COUN single quotes T dot instead. He swallowed the ache in his throat and said, "That's amazing, Lena. You've worked so hard. I'm proud of you." Her smile faltered. "That's it? What do you want me to say?" he asked quietly. "I've waited for you before, and I told myself if you ever came back, I wouldn't be the reason you left again." Tears welled in her eyes. "And what if I don't want to leave this time? Then don't. But you won't ask me to stay, because I don't want your love out of guilt." The words lodged like thorns in both of them. She turned away, and he let her dot in the days that followed. The bookstore felt colder. Lena came by less and less. Aiden stopped writing altogether. The journal she once read from sat unopened on the counter, collecting dust alongside his heart. For Lena, the opportunity in San Francisco was everything she'd dreamed of, but suddenly it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a decision that demanded she choose between who she used to be and who she had become beside Aiden. She had always run. But now, for the first time, she wasn't sure if leaving would set her free or break her forever, and Aiden, he had finally stopped waiting. But in doing so, he'd let the one woman he loved most drift away again. The distance between them wasn't measured in miles. It was in silence, in what was never said, and what they were too afraid to ask of each other. The evening sky bled into deep purple as rain began to fall gently over the quiet town. The bookstore lights glowed dimly behind its rain-streaked windows. Inside, Aiden sat alone, hunched over the counter with an untouched cup of coffee beside him. He hadn't written a word in days. Every line he tried to form collapsed beneath the weight of uncertainty. Then the door opened. Lena stood there, soaked from the rain, her hair clinging to her cheeks, her eyes wild with something between desperation and hope. "I couldn't leave," she whispered, her voice trembling as much as her fingers. Aiden stood slowly, stunned. "What?" "I got to the airport," she said, walking toward him. "I went through security, sat at the gate, and then I realized I was making the same mistake I made years ago, running again. And this time, I knew exactly what I was leaving behind." She stopped in front of him, water dripping onto the wooden floor, her heart in her hands. "I've spent so much of my life searching for meaning in places that never felt like home. And when I finally found it here with you, I almost walked away from it again because I was scared." Aiden looked at her, every part of him unraveling. Scared of what? That you'd stop waiting. He stepped closer, his hand reaching up to brush a wet strand from her cheek. I did, he said quietly. I stopped waiting, Lena, but that doesn't mean I stopped loving you. Her breath hitched. I stopped waiting because I didn't want to keep living for a hope that hurt every time it was delayed. But even when I stopped waiting, I never let go of you in my heart. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't need San Francisco. I don't need a big title or city lights. I just need peace. And somehow, you've always been that for me, even when I didn't know how to ask for it. Aiden didn't hesitate. He pulled her into his arms, the dampness of her coat soaking into his shirt, but he didn't care. He held her like he was anchoring himself back to life, like she was the missing piece of a story he had waited too long to finish. Their lips met not in the urgency of longing, but in the quiet relief of a love reclaimed. The rain kept falling outside, but inside, they stood wrapped in each other, two souls who had finally stopped running, finally speaking the truths they were once too afraid to voice. For the first time in years, neither of them felt lost because real love, had finally found them both in the silence. The rain had long stopped by morning, leaving the streets freshly washed and glistening under the soft golden hue of dawn. Sunlight spilled through the bookstore windows, lighting up the shelves and scattering warmth across the wooden floor where Lena and Aiden sat side by side, sharing coffee and quiet laughter. It was peaceful, simple, but it felt like everything. A week had passed since that night Lena returned, and with it came a softness neither of them had known in years. The rush, the chasing, the uncertainty, it had all quieted. Their days had fallen into a rhythm that felt almost too perfect to be real. Mornings spent opening the store together. Afternoons reading in silence or discussing characters like they were old friends. Evenings walking down maple-lined streets, fingers interlaced, dreams shared without fear of interruption. Lena had made her decision. She wouldn't be taking the job in San Francisco. Instead, she had sent a letter long and thoughtful, thanking the publisher for the opportunity and explaining that sometimes the greatest chapters of our lives are written in the places we least expect. I thought, I had to chase something big to feel worthy. She admitted one night as they lay on a blanket under the stars in the quiet town square. But the truth is, I never felt more alive than I do here, with you. Aiden turned to her, brushing his thumb against her cheek. You were always worthy, Lena, even when you didn't believe it. He'd started writing again too, not out of pressure, but from joy. A love story this time, inspired by the girl who had left and returned, and the boy who had stopped hoping, only to be given everything he never dared to dream. One Saturday afternoon, surrounded by townsfolk who had watched their story unfold from afar, Aiden stood outside the bookstore with trembling hands and a heart full of certainty. He took Lena's hand in front of a small crowd and knelt. You came back when I'd stopped hoping, he said, eyes locked on hers. But loving you has always been the one thing I've never forgotten how to do. So stay, not just for now, but forever. Lena's smile trembled, tears shimmering. In her eyes, I'm already home. The crowd clapped, and someone tossed confetti from a handmade cone. But all Aiden and Lena saw was each other, two people who had lost their way, only to find love waiting patiently where they'd least expected it. Their love didn't need grand cities or magazine features. It lived in between pages of half-read novels, in the soft brewing of morning coffee, in the comfort of shared silence, and in the steady beating of hearts that had once wandered and now finally rested. And so, in a little town wrapped in seasons and stories, they began a new chapter. Together, one filled with love, laughter, and the quiet magic of knowing they'd found everything they were ever searching for in each other. Because sometimes the best love stories aren't the ones we chase, but the ones that come back when we least expect them. And this was there forever.